But I think state law,
Mm.
not this session because it ran out of time, but they, for the last 4 sessions, they've been trying to take away city's ability to do a lot of things, including zoning STRs.
The door got stuck.
Not
So
gonna-
you get broke.
Oh,
All right, we're at 3 o'clock.
Yep, give Tess just a minute to get that all going.
We're
All
good.
going.
Okay, we'll call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on Wednesday, May 28th at 3 p.m. Item 2, public hearing. Port Aransas Planning and Zoning Commission will conduct a public hearing on the following. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. Item 2.1, Plan 24-14, major amendment for Cinnamon Shore PUD to include combining the Cinnamon Shore NUD with the current Cinnamon Shore PUD, as well as annexing adjacent portions of land. Applicant MILP LP, Daniel Mazak, representative, property location 5,000 block of Highway 361. Item 3, citizen comments and reports. At this time, comments will be taken from the audience on any subject matter. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, the Planning and Zoning Commission may not discuss or take action on any item that has not been posted on the agenda. No
Nobody.
speakers? Okay, right. Moving on to item 4, items for consideration. Discuss and take action or pass on any of the following. Approval of minutes from the April 24th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting.
Any questions? I make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 24th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I'll second it.
We have a first and a second. We have a motion and a second.
All right, we were motion by Stephen, seconded by Brenda, Richard K,
Abstain.
Bill Straber,
Yes.
Felicia Foster,
Yes.
Stephen Wilson,
Yes.
Brenda Owens.
Yes.
And Mike David,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, item 4.2, discuss and take appropriate action on zoning change request plan 25-14 for a major amendment for Cinnamon Shore PUD to include combining the Cinnamon Shore NUD with the current Cinnamon Shore PUD, as well as annexing adjacent portions of land. Applicant MILP LP, Daniel Mazak, representative, property location 5,000 block Highway 361.
So I'm going to make my portion of this very brief, and then I'll invite Daniel or Stephen to come up and kind of present their major amendment. Cinnamon Shore, I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with Cinnamon Shore North. Started out as a NUD, which is a neighborhood unit development, similar to Beach Walk, Mustang Royale, those kinds of things. Then, added that adjacent land to the north, made that a PUD. So we're contending with a Cinnamon Shore PUD, a portion of a Cinnamon Shore NUD, and then this new portion. You guys are probably well aware that we've shifted that access road down about 160 feet. So what they're asking to do is to add in that section of land in between Cinnamon Shore North, the NUD, and the access road. While doing that, because this was one of the first PUDs that we did, they have since perfected the PUD documentation to make it much easier for everybody to find things, to look at things, to look up things, to help keep everything regulated well. So they wanted to convert the old document into the newer format of the document. There are some other minor changes too that they'll go over with you guys, and we'll go from there. Cinnamon Shore originally approved in 2005. It looks like they made some amendments in 2007, and then we did some minor amendments that are always approved by staff in 2008, 2010, 2015, I think was the last one we did that.
Can we invite any of y'all to come tell us about your new plan?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Grunwald here with Urban Engineering. Daniel Mazak's also here. As Nicole summarized, we're trying to take the existing Cinnamon Shore North property, which consisted of the NUD and the PUD, add in the additional area between that and the access road into a format that is very similar to what was approved with the Cinnamon Shore South PUD. There are some things that the original NUD, of course, and then the original PUD didn't anticipate or incorporate that we have found desirable and are included in the Cinnamon Shore South, Shore 2 PUD. And there's also a few things that we figured out since that one was approved that we would like to also incorporate. I don't know if y'all got this document that Daniel sent with kind of the changes highlighted.
The markups,
Yeah.
we,
Oh,
they
okay.
do not.
Well, I guess the first thing to probably look at is the third page, which is attachment B1. It kind of shows the NUD boundary in blue, the original PUD boundary in pink, and then that red area is what we're wanting to add in as new property. Going back to the second page, this document looks totally different than the first PUD. It was very simplified. I think the actual PUD application was separate and there was a bunch of attachments. So this is kind of combining a lot of that information that was on the application, such as the regulating authority, the declarant, kind of a summary of the PUD itself. And has a index of all the different aspects of the PUD. So this is kind of a new sheet that wasn't in the previous one, but it's kind of what was established in the Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD to kind of summarize what was done previously. If you move to Sure.
I'd make a brief
Definitely.
comment.
Mhm.
So, back at Cinnamon Shore, so I used to work at Cinnamon Shore from 2011 through 2016. And, one of the things that I was heavily involved in doing is reviewing and preparing these planned unit development documents. So the first kind of major amendment one I personally prepared was for Palmia's document, and that's when this sort of format was first presented.
Mhm.
And so when we did a amendment to Palmia's document, we borrowed kind of the best from the new urbanism. It was done by DPZ, Duane, and like their new urban planners. They had kind of come up with this format, and we kind of mirrored that format, applied it to Palmia's PUD document. And then when Cinnamon Shore South was doing or Cinnamon Shore 2, as the South PUD is called, when they were annexing that land, I took that Palmia PUD format and I used it for the Cinnamon Shore South PUD document. And that created the document that's now the basis for this North PUD application. So we're just kind of carrying forward like each new iteration to kind of unify the styling of them. The one document that you never really got the chance to look at that would already be probably on file was in 2020, just before COVID. We had prepared a amendment for South that involved the hotel and conference center.
Mhm.
We had applied for that.
Mhm.
So we were going to be doing a land plan
Mhm.
amendment to incorporate that change. And I had come up with a series of new sheets that Stephen's going to be covering and or showing you guys as well. Those were primarily developed at that time. And versus that version, there's like very, very few things we've done in the last few years because I collected all that information and built those new sheets out in 2020. And we just, when that project didn't, happen, we never had the need to amend it. So now that we're actually annexing new land, we took that version and carried that forward to create this new application. So that's kind of the history of the format changes or whatever, and how we got to this version.
Gotcha.
And other
Thank you.
PUDs have kind of tried to, not copy it exactly, but have tried to put it together very similar.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a great format.
Let's
Yeah.
do a loose standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I guess the latest one we've done is a particular harbor or Spoonville Bay, and
Mhm.
we kind of started with what we'd had established for Cinnamon Shore too. So this is kind of the new format that you'll be seeing things done in.
Okay.
It's much more graphic. I mean, if you start looking at the attachment C1, before there was just kind of tables showing setbacks and building heights, so on and so forth. But now we've kind of got visuals that are, associated with.
I think we all appreciate pictures.
The original-
Yeah.
So just so you
Versus
know,
words.
The original
Yeah.
is in their packet, so
Okay.
they got to see the old
Yeah.
version as well.
Yeah, so you know, a lot of the first, urban standards, urban guidelines and attachment C kind of just summarize the theory and concept behind the different transect zones. You know, the T2 and T3 or T1 and T2 are kind of rural preserve and civic, you know,
Mhm.
open space type transect zones. T3 is the first residential, which is a larger, lower density. You know, T4 is another residential, that's a little higher density. T5 starts moving into the mixed use combination of, residential and commercial retail. And T6, I think, is the, you know, the highest density, condo type, hotel type, development, standards that apply to that transect zone. Attachment C3, I guess, is a sheet that we've got some new items that weren't necessarily in the Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD. I guess setbacks is one of the things that we've had a lot of experience with over the years and you know, wanted to make some amendments to that. In the past, you know, along our PUD boundary, there was a 10-foot required setback. It was primarily associated with rear building lines. But there are instances where there's actually side lot lines adjacent to a PUD boundary, and that typical setback would be 5 feet. So this is just kind of carrying over that as the established setback.
So Stephen, so I guess on the rear setbacks,
Mm.
this 5-foot setback for T4 is a change from 10 on previous Cinnamon Shore.
No, I was actually,
Documentation. Or is that the same? I guess that was a question I had earlier.
I don't have the, I don't think, I think the setbacks pretty much mirror what was established in Cinnamon Shore 2. The one thing that I was directly speaking on is when you've got a boundary of a PUD adjacent to something that's a not a PUD. Historically, that setback has been 10 feet to kind of mirror what the standard rear setback would be, thinking that all those lots along the perimeter would be, you know, backing up with their rears against the PUD boundary. But there have been a few instances where just due to the land plan or the anticipation of annexing something that wasn't in the PUD currently, you know, we've ended up with side lot lines instead of a rear lot line up against the PUD boundary. So in keeping with the, I guess, criteria that setback along the PUD boundary would mirror what the setback would be if it wasn't
It
a
was on the
PUD.
side.
You know, the typical side yard setback is 5 feet, so
Right.
that's kind of what we're trying to establish versus
Mhm.
a standard
Mhm.
10-foot, you know, no matter what the lot configuration is.
Yeah.
All right.
So when it's backing up against a non-PUD land, if it's considered the side, you want the 5 feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's only in those cases
Yeah.
where it backs up to a boundary.
Well, there's
Non-PUD boundary.
A
Uh,
non-PUD
yeah.
boundary.
a non-PUD boundary.
Right.
A side lot versus.
So if
rear.
you've got
Yeah.
somebody's backyard facing you, you've got 10 feet to the building, but if you've got somebody's side yard facing you, you don't need
Okay.
required to have 5.
Thanks for clearing that up. That was one of my questions.
I guess that's kind of the major change from the previously approved PUD to what we're talking about now. I guess there are
On the well, I don't want to step in front of you.
that's fine.
I have a question still about these 5-foot setbacks, and it's more to you, Nicole, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So us approving the paperwork, or if we choose to do so, is more of a general approval. It's not the specifics, like when it goes to, I guess it would eventually come back to us with the,
It's a final plat.
yeah, as the final plat, then that's when we would look at all of the individual situations and make sure that it applies correctly.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right.
Thank you.
This is a 30,000-foot view. The
Right.
plat is on the ground view.
Okay.
Then
Gotcha.
you also have plan review.
Like
as well.
this set
Civil
the
plan
standards for which they'll
Gotcha.
plat everything.
And then,
For residential, you don't?
no. So we've got
Okay, cool.
PUD is your 30,000 view. You've got the civil plans that they'll get approved to get their plats done.
Okay,
Infrastructure needs to be put in the plats. Individual lots will have plan review. which will apply building code in all of those things.
Also have site.
Building lines would be established typically at the plating stage.
And this is just really establishing what the minimums are. I mean, there's a lot of cases where we don't use the minimum, just depending on the situation.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, let's see. I guess some other changes are just, some details in terms of, the, allowable uses, some things that weren't specifically called out in the T2 recreational civic center were sports courts, pedestrian thoroughfare ponds that were used as an amenity. There's a lot of other uses that were listed before, but those weren't listed specifically, so we just wanted to kind of clarify that some of those things would be also available to be a use in that T2 zone. And then in the T5 and T6 zones, we wanted to specify that conference centers, boardrooms, meeting rooms, et cetera, would also be, I guess, incorporated in those uses. And I'm looking at attachment C4, what kind of talks about, various uses for the various transit zones.
So I have a question on T6. You have 12 stories max there. Is that what it was before, or is that a new?
That's what it was before. We've never gone that high. I think,
That's what it was for the original Cinnamon Shore PUD?
no, that's what it is for the Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD.
Correct.
And was that done with the convention center in mind, or is that totally separate of that?
I think, back when they first did that Cinnamon Shore South, convention center wasn't in consideration then, but, just kind of
Kept the
Now-
possibility
The
open.
hotel was-
First, highest density, kind of worst anticipate or not, highest anticipated building desire to see. That's kind of what we had come up with.
Okay.
I think in some of the minor amendments, that were done previously, we kind of decided to, or elected to reduce that for certain lots to a minimum of 6 or something, kind of in exchange of getting other changes we wanted. So I don't think, I mean, right now 12 is possible, but the highest we've ever even conceived of is 6 with a real 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I know, Daniel, when we spoke previously and when we've reviewed this here, that this is now allowing for mobile vending where it was not allowed for in the past. As you can imagine, that's been a subject of, let's just say interest in town in the past. And with that in mind, I guess just help me wrap my head around what the goal is for that. Because you can picture a trailer park, or you can picture just one Starbucks coffee vendor.
Right.
What
Chick-fil-A.
are y'all thinking?
Yeah, so I'll kind of share what the intent for that is. So like one of the items that we've inquired about doing before in North that we've been told was a no-go was to get like a tricycle kind of cart with an umbrella and an ice box and like sell popsicles or something out of it. That was not permitted type of use. And then aside from that, the other thing that we commonly face, like this past weekend, Lisa Bella's was closed on Monday. We had Dillon's open and we had the start of Stouts. They were only kind of semi-operating, trying to serve. We had a 3-hour wait at Dillon's Pizza. So when we know that during peak season, we're never going to be building enough restaurants that all of our restaurants are going to be able to keep wait times down. So during those times when every restaurant in Port A is also just stacked full of people waiting to eat, we'd like to be able to try to kind of supplement that and offer additional food vending options. So during peak season, when it's super busy and all the restaurants kind of have extra people waiting outside, or the wait times are getting really long, and you're like, hey, rather than waiting, let's just go grab a sandwich at that food truck or whatever. So that's what we'd like to be able to do, is kind of supplement our peak season like busyness with additional food options. At South right now, because we do already have the language in the PUD for mobile vending, we've kind of been trialing a little food truck kind of court in our South Town Center since we don't have any permanent restaurants open. We're in design on one right now, but we were just talking earlier this week about how we're not gonna have it complete by next summer, so we're gonna miss that as well. And we have 300 or so properties out there that can be occupied, some of which are rented. So there's a high volume of people, basically as many people at South now as there are at North. But they're driving over to North, or many are driving even further into Port A to come find a place to eat. So we tried to set up food trucks and stuff out there. We didn't really have a very good turnout for that this past weekend. I think they failed to kind of advertise it adequately and stuff. We had some that only did a couple $100 of, you know, activity on Saturday or Sunday, which isn't a whole lot. So I don't know how much we'll be using it, but we'd like to be able to, you know, offer that kind of mobile vending component as a way to address scalability during the summer season. And our desire is not to overbuild restaurants and stuff. We want people to flow out of the community and into Port A as well, particularly in the shoulder season when like we kind of rotate our restaurateurs so that they're stagger their closings. There's always something open, but they're not all open at the same time. So kind of trying to balance all of that.
Is this, this doesn't affect PUD, but is it gonna be something like the food trucks are gonna be Cinnamon Shore operated or bring in outside vendors, a mix of both?
Currently, we've been doing outside vendors. We've considered doing it ourselves. We haven't stepped into doing that yet, but because we've had kind of some subpar performances, we've had some vendors who have already indicated they don't intend to come back. So as a result, if it's something that we kind of want to do to meet demand, but it's kind of going to be a loss, we're probably going to have to, you know, operate it ourselves. And if we need to, we'll look at doing that. But for now, we've tried to bring in outside vendors just to kind of proof up whether we have demand, whether the venue location makes sense for it or not. So it's also something that we'd like to be able to do as part of kind of event activations, seasonal parties or things like that to kind of do you know, the kind of pop-up vending like events once in a while. We haven't done those in the past because we haven't really been able to, but we'd like to incorporate that as part of like an option in the future.
And with respect to the specific PUD here in Cinnamon Shore now, if you want to bring in a food trailer, where would you stage it?
So in North, probably somewhere around the town center, or in the case of like one of our pools, Dunes Pool. So that's the one next to the big kind of sand dune there. You can kind of see the nice blue water right there. So that building at the back used to be kind of a concessions like food, light food kind of offering. We have a grease trap and stuff set up there. They used to cook burgers, hot dogs, serve you tacos, stuff like that out of there. After Harvey, we renovated that space and converted it into a fitness center because our old fitness center was about half that size. But now our Kiera's pool, the one up by the Gulf front that does have food and beverage, they really can't do any more volume out of that facility. They are just packed in there in terms of their ability to serve like that pool when it's fully busy. And we have more folks that would like to be able to be there that are going to some of our other pools. So like the ability to set up a concessions or food truck vendor outside of that pool during peak season when it's really busy and people would like to be able to order more food, but they can't. So they're instead waiting at this pool or they're simply not ordering. You know, adding to pools with seasonal food and beverage would be another good option. Periodically, maybe some of our other parks, but really I think our town center areas are where we're anticipating it, where people are already coming to dine and expecting to find food, but instead they're finding a longer than, you know, acceptable wait. We want to capture them there and give them an option.
Okay, and you brought up that it's during the peak.
Yeah, that's
Peak times.
when we're looking.
So my concern there is the parking for the food trucks, the people who are coming to the food trucks, if they're walking or, you know, golf carts, will there be clear lanes if there's an emergency for fire can get through, EMS can get through. I mean, how are you gonna manage clear space?
Right. So right now, we wouldn't be proposing to, place them in any areas that would be impeding of emergency access or fire access. Parking is kind of a unique situation. So the way our parking, which there's language in here regarding that, we kind of manage it in the retail districts at a global level instead of having like a lot like say IGA where you've got your building and you've got all your parking there on site. Or I know you saw some applications recently that were kind of horse trading with parking spaces at one, business for extra parking spaces that were available at another business.
Right.
We manage all of that through a kind of master level parking plan where we usually plan out and build a lot of the on-street parking or parking lots at the development level, and then deliver a pad site that doesn't require any additional parking be constructed. And then every time we go build a restaurant or a retail use or a condo building or something that's tapping into that parking, we go ding it based on the amount of uses. So if there's 80 tables and one parking space per 4 people at a dining table, we go count those against the total and reduce the available parking spaces within that district. So right now, we are in a condition where on paper, at least, we still have a surplus at both north and at south, or south in particular, other than some office buildings that we're operating out of there. We haven't built any uses aside from the like food truck parking. So like right now, the parking basically is in place for any of these uses, and we could count against the available parking spaces for those.
So you have clear places where they can back out and not be.
Yeah, so we created at South, and I have a site plan for that if you'd like to see it, but we created 2 spots that are within the kind of grassy park space where we put decomposed granite coming up from the street onto the lot for them to be able to back up. One is a Shore Cafe, or it's like a Coffee Waves kind of trailer that's parked there right now. And then we have another spot on the opposite side, and then we have like 4 pergolas that have some shade structures and some picnic tables and stuff over there. And then we took 2 of the parallel parking spaces that were created on the street, and we've like just kind of coned those off since they're easy to pull into and allow you to configure your window towards the sidewalk so that they're out of the street, but they're easily able to kind of back into and park in those 2 spots. So.
In the city right, I mean, in the private right of way, but out of the travel way, out of the fire access.
Yeah.
With the people that they're serving and with the food trucks themselves.
Well, and he brought up a good point, because you don't want the people in the front.
You don't want them in the street.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it has to be set up to where it's, off of it.
South Street.
And some of the language that's like presented here, so like early in this document, attachment like C1, part of the motivation to add like all of this. This second photograph here was from like our opening launch party of Cinnamon Shore South. David Parsons was there, I believe Wendy was there, some other folks from from the city were over there on that kind of launch day when we first were doing sales. We did that on this kind of peninsula, the image just below, you see that kind of checkerboard pattern. So that's part of a private right of way. It's a street. There was no other development around that area. We set up a tent and held that event in kind of the public right of way. Inclusion of these photographs and this description below is sort of there to present and state that we'd like approval to be able to do that on occasion in a private right of way, to close sections of streets or to conduct, mobile vending on without obstructing egress in a parking spot. So those are there to kind of present that example and include it as a allowable use. That type of thing was not present before in the PUD document. Mobile vending was, but it could have been, perceived to be a bit ambiguous whether that needs to be conducted at a park or on a commercially zoned lot. Here I'm presenting that I'd like to be able to do it at the park, the commercially zoned lot, and other spots that make sense
Mm.
within reason
You'll
and
bring
without
that-
blocking egress.
You'll bring that where we can see that, right?
Bring one.
Typically, no. So once it's within our PUD document and approved, as long as it's not something that we believe that there would be any objection from the city or egress or fire department, we don't typically come back and present that. That's covered within sections of the document that say with approval from the regulating authority within the development. And the regulating authority is the declarant, and the declarant is the developer.
So as long as they adhere to what this says here, they're fine to do it without any additional approval.
That's what I didn't know.
And that came up this past weekend. I think the city got a hold of our flyer about the food truck offering. Erroneously, some of our vendors advertised that it was at Cinnamon Shore North, which was not correct. It was at Cinnamon Shore South, but they reached out and we got back to them showing that, no, sorry, it's at South and it is in the PUD that we're allowed to do it. And they said, hey, okay, so.
Is it something that we should require a permit just to set up so that you can have a review for fire or egress or anything like that?
I mean, that,
How do,
This level of review, or would that?
it wouldn't come to the planning and zoning. It
No.
would be a city
Yeah.
staff level of review.
is this something that's already done at South and
It's already-
Palmio, correct? Like it's,
South do this
Yeah.
without any additional permitting from us.
But they don't typically do it in a right of way, correct?
Palmio, I believe.
They've had food trucks set up in
Yeah.
market spaces, which are in the private right of way.
So like if we did something at Roberts Point Park, that would require a permit through the city.
Special events permit, and that's
Yeah.
different because it's on public property.
Okay.
But it's not typically reviewed by building department staff, fire marshal, anything like that. That's done at the city manager level to just approve the event in the location.
Okay. So I had a couple notes as I was looking through here, and I just want to say it is very easy to read, and thank you for that. You know, I've got some experience reading these a little bit here and there, but one of the things that I did notice is there's some conflicts with some adopted building codes. Only from the standpoint of when you, and I'm gonna use Nicole and I were kind of visiting about this before the meeting. When you have a 0 lot line and you have the ability to, you need to firewall that wall, you need to do different things according to building code. Now, the building official has the ability to overwrite things, but for a liability standpoint, I think you should pull those things out of your PUD document and leave that to the building official. Only because from a liability standpoint, if you allow somebody to put windows there on that firewall side and there's an issue, then that's a pretty major liability. And also, you know, this is kind of a major overhaul of everything. And looking at, you know, combining this piece and that piece, and now let's look at how we're doing things a little bit different. I would recommend a review by the fire marshal. Just go back through everything like it was a brand new document, even though it's not. And then also a review by the building official,
Sure.
just to
So the
capture
building-
some of those.
Building
things.
official was part of my review. Fire marshal has looked at all of the attachments that are in here in previous PUDs. None of those have changed versus this PUD. Fire marshal reviews at the plating stage on every plat, regardless of if he reviewed the PUD documents, if it's even part of a PUD. So I guess at what stage right now are you asking him to, like, what are you asking him to review that he hasn't looked at previously or will look at in the future?
To review it all encompassing in one document. You know, if you reviewed this piece and that piece and this piece, and then any of the language changes, you know, sometimes something as simple as one word can change how it's, you
So
know,
he's really only looking at fire access?
fire access, street access, if you've got a a 24-foot wide, street and you've got 16-foot wide of pavement, that doesn't meet the requirements for a ladder truck.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's only at the plat stage that we get to that level of detail though, right?
Yeah, but it's all in here, is what I'm saying. It's in here, so.
Historically, it's always been made clear that, when you do submit a final plat, when you do submit construction plans, that, it's gonna have to meet the fire access. Fire
Absolutely.
requirements. I mean, the
Yeah.
HUD is kind of a, like Nicole was saying, kind of an overhead
Mhm.
broad look at things. But it comes down to, actual design,
Mhm.
which is construction plans, final plat. That's where you, I guess, have to make sure you're meeting all the requirements. And that's typically when they review things.
Yeah, and most of the ones that I've been involved in other jurisdictions, we've done all of that preliminary to the PUD approval. To make sure that everything that's in there is something that could be approved, because the last thing you want to do is take this and go design something and then come back and have to change it from an engineering perspective.
So you're modernizing the format. You made that very clear up front. Obviously, that's a good thing for everybody here. It's easier to read, but there's other things obviously you're wanting besides just to modernize the document. You're not going to go through that exercise just to get a prettier piece of paper. So from what I'm seeing here, it's the ability to utilize mobile vending, and then the annexation part. Is that one of the major drivers behind this
Yes,
upscale?
effectively, the annexation warranted the major amendment, and because we're having to do what's classified as a major amendment in order to annex that property, then there was no reason not to come forth with everything that we'd like to, present and ask in this same move. That way we don't have to hopefully come back for this or any other stuff, since we're already doing the annexation.
Other than those two, are there any other major accomplishments that you're trying to
Do this real quick.
get through?
Those are the main ones. That's really the only kind of flashy or fun one. The rest is kind of tidying up. So the
What about the
parking-
golf cart?
Yeah, we have some, yeah.
Yeah, so golf.
Tell us
cart
about that.
parking,
That
I know
seems
was a
new.
question. Yeah, so I thought that I had that in South already. It turns out I had put it in the 2020 proposition, but I didn't, we never came forward with
Mhm.
that. It was put on one agenda and then pulled before that meeting. It was right in March of 2020 when like COVID and just everything happened. It seemed unimportant to be discussing anything
Yeah.
other than that process.
So currently at North, are there any golf cart specific spots?
No, we don't really have, okay, I take that back. They were constructed as full-size car parking spaces, and we've since converted them into cart parking spaces in order to increase the capacity of carts that we can park in those areas. So some are the ones right across from Dillon's. They're on the town center side of the
Mhm.
lawn.
Yeah.
There's a handful of parking spots there. We kept having people back into the patio dining area in front of Dillon's there. And so we felt that cart restriction on those handful of spots right there would like eliminate people hitting it with cars. The others are right in front of Kiera's pool. We can fit like 6 carts there or 3 or 4 cars. So we striped those as cart only. So yeah, I think you can see that those are all carts, like cart.
You know what the current percentage split is? I'm assuming it's pretty low, right?
It's
At the moment.
very low. Yeah, very few of the parking spots right now we've indicated to be cart restricted. In South, there's a greater amount of areas where I've kind of done it. There were some hidden purple spots by Neighborly Square Pool, which is our phase 3 pool. That just the street width right there. We wanted to accommodate more car parking. I had parallel parking spots. I had a bit of space available on site that I could extend those parallel spots to be head in for carts, but not for cars. But I figured, hey, I can park like a dozen carts here, or I can park like 4 if I do parallel only spots. So I made them all head in cart spots, just to enable more cart parking, both for the pool and for nearby homes that might like to park their cart there during their stay.
Do y'all plan to, so if the PUD passes as is, you're calling for 20%, at least 20, up to 20% of parking spots, excluding residential for golf carts, and on-street parking, possibly up to 40. Do y'all plan to go and retrofit spots throughout north to get what numbers y'all want? Is this what y'all's plan there?
Yeah, there's really not that many spots that we've looked at or considered it. The other spots that I'm kind of looking at, if you want to go to Dunes Pool. So that's an area that historically we have high volume of people during the summertime. We have on-street, or I call it on-street. It's not within the driving width. It's off the driving lane, parallel parking spots built into the kind of street profile where all those cars are parked up and down the street there. So all of those parking spots are all just car-sized parallel parking spots right now. On the pool side of that lot, I'm considering maybe moving that sidewalk to be closer to the fence and converting those parallel parking spots to be head-in cart parking spots as a way to increase the amount of parking we can accommodate. It's eliminating maybe where 4 cars could have parked, but it's also basically just giving priority parking to those golf carts and then moving those cars into some other nearby spots down the street. So it's not really a percentage that I've been overly concerned about. We could probably live with the parameters y'all have kind of worked with in recent kind of applications for alternative parking plans. And that's where that 20% came from.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
recent-
I'll be honest, my concern is sort of that 40% for the on-street. That's a pretty high percentage split there. And there's already if you drive through Cinnamon Shore, most of us are pretty familiar with it. During the busy times, during holiday weekends, it's packed with full-size vehicles on the street in the houses. So converting up to 40% of those to cart spots to me would seem a little, could present a problem down the
It'd
road.
just probably make it more congested.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
think
did
that's a
see
good-
where you guys have defined a cart space at 6 by 14. The city requirements are 6 by,
So city doesn't have it written into their ordinance, but by policy, 6 by 10.
10. Okay.
So it's a little bit bigger.
We know that 10's not enough for a standard 6-seat easy go. So,
Yeah. I appreciate
kudos
that.
to you for going to the
Yeah.
14, but that's still a significant departure from a 9 by 18, which is what the standard is for a vehicle. Okay.
One of the other inclusions here, put somewhere, oh yeah, the little 1 in a circle. So this pertains to golf carts as well. For long-term or cart operational storage spots may be matched to the size of the carts being stored. So this is really hopefully something we'd be working with Nicole or city staff on. But if we're applying for registration for 200 golf cart, spots to store carts for a rental operation, that we be permitted to park those tire to tire, bumper to bumper or whatever, and not go with the 6 by 14, because that would waste a lot of additional space.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that's not typically how we actually store them. We store them like tire to tire, bumper. to
Yeah,
bumper.
right.
So-
Pack them in like sardines.
And that
Which
was-
is fair.
that-
Yeah. you're
That
just
wouldn't be
gonna-
public parking. anyway.
No, that's
Yeah.
exactly, that's out of the way. That's not really concerning me.
What mechanisms do we have in place to say, okay, well, we don't blanket approving this much golf cart parking seems like it could be a bit of a stretch, but could we say, would this then come up later at a plating stage or at a design for, the changes in the street and the sidewalk for, the pool area? Would we be able to review it then and potentially grant some spaces?
Could we recommend like going forward from here, say, reduce that 40% to 20%?
And then let staff approve it. So at this point, once this PUD document, nothing really comes back to P&Z, to city council.
Okay.
The same way an alternative parking plan would
Right.
for an in-town law. So whatever they write into here would be kind of the standard that they would be able to use. So I think that if you're not comfortable with that 40%, now would be the time to
Address
reduce that.
what percentage is appropriate? Okay.
And I'm amenable to that 20% if we think that that's a.
That seems to
I
be
think
what
that's
the
fair.
general
I mean,
rule
that
of
seems-
thumb has been.
That's
In
on
the
on
end.
street.
If
part,
that
right?
much, because that's.
Yeah, they already have 20% for everything, like everything excluding on street and residential. This was sort of just match those.
On your
I'm-
page 12, where's that one? Where's the detail for that? I see the one with the circle, but I don't see the detail.
Okay, so these two areas down here, this one with the circle at the end of the first line, and then it's.
Okay,
here
I got you. Thank you.
on that side.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of hesitation with the golf cart parking, just because alternative parking plans
Mhm.
for the city are very specific to the unique use
Mhm.
there. So not that I think that they would, but if every single use there was allowed to have a 20% golf cart
Mhm.
instead of, just some
Yeah.
places, it could be problematic.
Yeah, that's
Agreed.
what I'm worried
Yeah.
about.
So
Yeah,
if we're,
very
so then
much.
let's take the specifics to it then. So if we're trying to solve this for the pool area, and so how many potential spaces, regular spaces are we trying to eliminate and replace with the golf carts? I mean,
And is it just the pool area? Are there any other areas that y'all are in mind thinking of targeting golf cart spots for?
So some of the recent things that we've been doing when we do these, we call them home site cottages. They're walk up, standalone structures. So you own it kind of like a single family home, but it's technically a condo like footprint with a building on it.
is that like,
And,
right as you're crossing the bridge in Cinnamon Shores?
Yeah,
too?
so those
So
little bridge units.
4 units there? Okay.
And then there's 6 or 7 of them right next to that bridge there in South.
Okay,
So those units, there's a bunch of head-in parking there. So those are all car-sized parking spots that we have there for those units. What we've done in some of phase 5 and 6 is, in addition to the 2 car-sized parking spots, we've also provided 1 cart-sized parking spot per home. Just having observed that that's commonly the kind of use case we'd see for those kind of smaller size cottages, and provided that on street, because otherwise we were finding that those cars and carts were starting to drift further and further down the street, parking in front of other units. So we wanted to accommodate that closer to the kind of the units that were using them in that way.
And
I
how,
don't see that many other scenarios, like some of our restaurants that are offering delivery to home are asking to have 1 or 2 cart spots dedicated near their facility so that they can have like their kind of cart shuttle car to go make deliveries and then reliably pull back and park like close to the unit so they can load it up with food again.
It'd be safer for them to have something designated.
Yeah, so those are the kind of uses that we've seen most commonly. And then during kind of the evening time, a lot of our homes are renting carts, and if the weather's nice, they'll take a cart in lieu of a car. So we've tended to lean into it as a way to provide more spaces, not so much like allocate less space to parking, but take 3 car parking spots and make them into 6 cart parking spots or something like that. So we've used it as a way to add parking really rather than
Replace that, yeah.
so
reduce.
from a
parking.
general ratio though, if you're eliminating a regular parking spot, you can essentially get or plan for 2 golf cart spots for every 1 regular car spot. Is that kind of the
Can you get that much?
That's a-
rough
no,
math?
for,
Really?
No, I would say
I
it'd
thought
be
it
more
was-
like 1 out of every 4. If you could turn 4 into 5, is that closer?
Uh,
5 would be what,
You're going.
45? So
Mm.
So I'm just trying to figure out the
Yeah.
math of
So
what
five-
percentage we're
Just
actually.
depends on how you,
Agree.
yeah, if you're going parallel nose in, you can get more, right?
Yeah,
If you're
Right.
like in parallel, then that
Yeah.
would be like
And that's
1.4,
3 golf
Right.
carts across.
Well, yeah.
1.6
Spots
spots
to the
per,
3 golf
yeah.
spots.
Yeah.
This
Two
is
golf
Like
carts,
4 to
2 car spot.
Yeah,
Nobody
I
said
guess-
math was gonna be on the test.
right?
So a 33% increase in.
So have y'all done
Yeah,
it?
it's almost 2 to 1. 1.92 is the ratio, just the square footage of a 9 by 18 to a 6 by 14. So it's close to 2 to 1, but they're not going to be
Quite,
can't train
yeah.
them quite like that. You have to get
No.
like 5 or 6 of them in a line to get the efficiency to be able.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have y'all done any traffic studies showing in peak times how many people are driving golf cart, or how many golf carts are on the road versus how many
So
stranded
that's a
vehicles?
unique question. We did do a traffic study recently. We did a warrant study a couple years back for a traffic light at Market Street, and we met the conditions to warrant a traffic light. That traffic light is now proposed for the beach access road because we didn't feel we'd be able to get to in that close of proximity to one another. As far as cars for carts, a lot of the time we end up with homes bringing their cars and then also booking carts for their stay. What I'm advising, and I'm not, I guess, fully supported in this right now. There's kind of divisions within our organization that feel whether it's advisable to charge for parking of cars
Mhm.
on property, like parking passes. But I think implementing a parking pass system is something that I support in order to reduce the quantity of cars potentially, or get people to carpool. Like instead of bringing 4 cars down, bring 3 or whatever. If you have the chance to pick
Yeah.
up 1 or 2 other people and remove a car, and then that gives me the ability to say, hey, if you trade your car when you get your cart, I'm not going to charge you to park your car. We're going to park it in this overflow lot, and then you can get your cart and you don't have to pay for that car parking pass. And so I can start pulling cars off of the street and putting them somewhere like our marina property or somewhere across the street where I can store a couple hundred cars and get those out of the community and instead replace them with smaller parts. So I'm kind of trying to come up with a global management plan, pitch it throughout the organization and stuff. We haven't really made it very far yet with that, but I think that we could put that on paper right now, comp the passes for a couple of years, but just let it be there as part of like the operation. And then in the future, if it really is a problem, we can start exercising that or limiting the number of cars that you're allowed,
Her
your
house.
car-
Yep.
Yeah, your house has 3 parking spots, you get 3 parking passes. They're for the drive, or you need to park them in the driveway. If you're parking them on the street, you're gonna have to pay for that parking pass or whatever. It's a way to just reduce the number of cars. So right now, we haven't done any of that, but those are all things that I'm trying to figure out.
If you had to take a guess, do you think there would be as many carts as there are cars driving around, or?
I mean, most of the carts are rented through Cinnamon Shore, right? So
Many are, yes.
how many for North do you average on a busy weekend? I know y'all sell out. How many carts is that?
Yeah, I think they have 180 something right now, and they had rented all of them, but that was split between north and south.
Is that the normal number, or does that have anything to do with the recent vandalism?
So
I think those carts were not. part
Yeah,
of
those were
Cinnamon
not
Shore.
our-
Yeah, those are,
Oh, no.
that was the previous vendor. Those are,
Okay.
They're not in the mix.
yeah, those are,
I don't know. I do anticipate that long term, I mean, our operation between both properties will probably be like 300 to 400 for north, maybe about a cart per house. Not every home rents them. Some owners own their own. Some people rent from outside vendors, but then you get homes that'll rent 3 carts. I mean, I stayed in January briefly with about 3 other couples and all of our kids, and I mean, we had 3 carts in order to get everyone down the beach and stuff like that. So
So where are you gonna park all this?
that's what.
Well,
yeah.
and y'all do,
They're
Only
already there.
doing 20%.
so y'all do have
They
overflow.
park in regular parking spots when they need to, or park within the home's parking. So we usually allocate space with it when a home is planned for cars as well as spots for car parking when we can.
And you had mentioned some of your overflow is on the other side of 361, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're looking at where we're gonna place our kind of cart operation. If you look on this map, in fact, this is on the same side of the highway. It's not on the marina site, but
Oh, that
Okay.
extension part? Okay, yeah.
page,
The other side of the new access road.
yeah, page
Yeah.
D1, it's 13.
That's right here.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
kind of pink spot right here. So this,
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't do an acreage takeoff, but it's fairly large, like 4 acres or something maybe.
Okay.
That we're looking at using as a operations facility. So everything from housekeeping, storage of air filters and linens to golf cart storage and maintenance. So that would be an area where we would store a lot of our carts until they're rented. And then we would take that cart over to that home. And then I may be able to accommodate some degree of like trading, take a car, park it somewhere over here, release them with a cart to go back to the community. I have
Right.
other acreage on the other side of the highway where we had contemplated to do this facility or to do like a large cart storage,
Sure.
employee parking. That's the other thing. I mean, we have in peak season, probably 100 people on property. If we can get their cars out of the community, that can do a lot. So shuttling in our own staff
It just seems like a pretty dangerous proposition to be parking across 361.
Golf
Goodness,
carts.
how you're
Yeah.
proposing to get this.
Also, that's where
I
that
guess-
traffic light, like, if we get that
Mm.
traffic light there at
I
that
see, yeah.
location, we would be proposing to be able to use that traffic light to cross the highway.
And that's gonna be state
It's
defined.
tech stop.
Yeah,
That's
not
next up.
Part
us.
of our comprehensive plan, so it's
Sure.
more favorable, but it's a tech stop decision.
Gotcha.
And
Uh,
you'll have the same situation right now, like I know with the Spoonbill Bay development, they're talking with us about ways to get to this traffic light across the property that we own, and we're amenable to that, planning to work with them, because the city's plan proposes to allow for slip lanes and
Mhm.
kind of parallel
Mhm.
traversal. So we're looking to allow them to travel kind of north across our property to get to that traffic light and hopefully eventually cross the highway to the beach once that traffic light's in place.
Right,
Mhm.
that
And the
plan
beach
is in
access roads. are
place not only for golf carts, but just to make it safer for regular cars to pull on and off the highway.
Yep.
Plus it'll help slow down the traffic.
So,
Hopefully.
so
Yeah,
Daniel,
Hopefully,
Hopefully.
hopefully they're not.
It won't stop
going
some
through
of
the
those
lines.
people.
so based on all this, you were quick to say that you'd be comfortable with 20% from the 40%. Would you be comfortable with 5 to 10%? I mean, this is where we kind of need to figure out the math to see
Right.
what
Yeah,
we
and-
want to do.
You know, I might be, let me look at what the language kind of says.
Yeah,
All
over-
transects
A
excluding.
flat percentage and then an increased percentage with kind of city staff.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sitting over here thinking this whole
Or city
time.
staff can approve you up to a higher percentage.
Right.
Yeah, tiered approach
Yeah.
with, yeah.
Or
So-
go ahead and approve the 20%, but all of it has to be approved by city staff prior to implementation, prior to construction.
So help me figure out what's
Because
the,
both of those are
percentages
legal?
Go up, their carts go up. Right now, they're at
Yeah.
180. When they go to
Yeah.
300,
That's
then they're
gonna be
gonna want a
whole
bigger
new.
percentage.
And
Yeah.
when they're stored off site, that's obviously not an issue.
Mhm.
But when they're all rented out, on top of the people that have probably bought too many cars for
Right.
the locations that
Right.
are staying
So
in.
There's not
That's
gonna be
just
enough
an extra
parking.
400, potentially 400 golf carts in all of these communities that
Mhm.
just add to the parking problem.
so what's the driver on trying to keep the ratio low? I mean, other than it's
Well, it
codified.
gives
in
them
the
the
rest of the
ability to
city.
have too many vehicles in a location and.
I understand that, but why are we,
We don't want to replace full-size vehicle spots with, a bunch of full-size vehicle spots with golf cart spots, right? Because
but if
they already have a,
if they have 300 golf carts running around and 100 regular cars, I'm just trying to figure out what is our driver?
we're trying to just prevent any more congestion in the parking situation out there. It gets pretty bad during holidays anyway, as is.
Pretty
And
narrow streets, pretty congested area, and you got.
Just trying to.
But if,
Golf carts can always park in full-size spots.
yeah,
Full-size cars cannot always park in golf
Yeah.
cart spots. So when you've got a lot of regular car parking spots, you can accommodate golf carts as well. But when you reverse that and you make them only accessible to golf carts, that limits your regular car parking.
And of the 100 cars that he mentioned, those 100 cars in peak season are just for their staff members.
Yeah.
Not even considering the guests.
Mhm.
And I'm just worried about the overflow. I mean, whatever this sets, then sets in the city, the residents.
Yeah, you gotta think
So
about that as
You
well.
Daniel,
gotta think
you,
about how it's gonna affect Port Aransas too.
Every example that you gave seems very reasonable and makes
Mhm.
sense, and I think everyone would agree that that would be a good idea. Would you be agreeable to what we're kind of discussing right now, where we lower the percentage, but it's or there's a stipulation in there somehow that says you can do 10% without staff approval, but you're approved up to the 20, but after 10, you have to get approval from staff?
I'm open to that.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think as long as we approach it from a standpoint of kind of evaluating those conditions and what we feel is reasonable, or if we're using it as a means to add parking, take 3 car parking
Sure.
spots in a space.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
serve, 8 carts or something like that, and there's adequate car parking in the area
Right.
already.
And that's always.
Yeah.
key.
And it-
There's
and it
adequate-
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It has to be evaluated.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to take it away from
No,
y'all. We
we-
just want to make sure that
Yeah.
it's done in a smart manner that, and
We
it's-
don't want to hand you a blank check.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
and,
fine.
and we've gotta think of the safety of the people out there too.
Right.
Because we all know what happens to vacation break.
Yeah.
And,
I saw-
that's the main concern because the streets and all are so tight out.
I was coming back from Corpus yesterday and there's a golf cart coming from south to north on 360.
I see it a lot. I've seen a lot of them come from south going to.
That's a different story.
On the access road.
Yeah.
I mean, on the shoulder,
Yeah.
Shoulder.
and it's getting more.
Just people that just have no
There was,
thought about
So
safety
if-
at all.
if we can do that,
Mhm.
so we're thinking 10% with up to 20 approved with city staff review.
Is
That's
that something
that sounds
possible?
like Senior.
Are y'all agreeable with that?
I'm agreeable with that.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'd ask just out of curiosity, if there were conditions where city staff felt it was reasonable to even go beyond that in a case that was like an alternative parking plan or something, would you be amenable that that be considered if the evidence seemed to support it for whatever reason? I don't know what that scenario is.
I
right
think
now.
that would,
Alternative parking.
yeah, I
plans
think
have
that'd come back to the
to us
alternative parking
anyway.
plan through
Yeah.
us, yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying to go down the path of alternative parking plan if they want to go beyond that
Beyond the
20%.
20.
Mhm.
I mean, that
Yeah.
feels.
I think that works. I just like some avenue to be
Mhm.
able to, rather than if a normal parcel with somewhere else in the city can do it, I'd like to be able to
Sure.
make the ask, do
Yeah.
the negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You,
That's
you don't want to wait 60 to 90 days to make a parking space.
Yeah.
We get it,
Yeah.
you know? No.
So this is what I've got. We're gonna change that to be 10% in both of those percentage cases. With approval up to 20% based on staff's recommendations and
Mhm.
approvals. Beyond that, it would go through a regular alternative parking plan process, the planning and zoning and city council.
Yes,
that works for me.
Nice. I like
Now,
I do too.
On the food trucks. What kind of precedents will that set for the city?
I mean, it's already included in the Cinnamon Shore South and Palmia HUDs. So
Okay.
if there is a precedent set by that inclusion in a PUD document, it's already set.
So those two can have it.
Correct. Those two have that written into their PUD document. They can have that already. This mirrors that exactly. I think that it doesn't automatically set a precedent for city use as much as it sets a precedent for what we allow in planned unit developments. So I think that moving forward, if somebody were to say, you let Cinnamon Shore do it, you let Palmia do it, yes. They have planned unit developments, they are master planned communities, that's the reason they have those additional things. You on Oak Street can't do it because you're not that same situation.
I think the benefit to the city would be that if they can't get anything to eat Cinnamon Shore and we're worried about congestion in the city and traffic on 361, if we give them a reason to stick around and use a golf cart and park wherever and eat there, that helps the city of Port Aransas as much as anybody.
Yes, definitely. I would-
One other parking related point I wanted to bring up was your offsite parking. Y'all have it as, for offsite parking, anything within an 800-foot radius of the building or land in question. I know we discussed this a little bit, but I think in the city ordinance, it's 250 feet of that proposed location for offsite parking, as well as a 50% max for offsite parking. Just wanted to see if there's, I know y'all, is this something that was in the original PUD for Cinnamon Shore? I know it affects sort of like y'all's park locations, right? Like the city center and the Great Lawn areas. I mean, are there any other areas you're thinking that you would have this, offsite parking such a distance from where y'all want to consider it
So
at?
just for everybody else's benefit, we're on page.
Yeah, sorry,
8,
C8.
and specifically the recreation civic.
But
portion.
yes, and then it goes to when you look at the
Offsite parking.
footnotes, the offsite parking, they want it for parks, commercial, civic, office, retail, lodging, and manufacturing. So it's more than just, to me, more than just the, recreation civic.
So I'm looking at, I have a lot of copies of these things here. by
Yeah.
the way. Just so this one is the existing South PUD.
Mhm.
So I'm checking this one here versus this version
It-
is.
I think it is the same.
Yeah.
Changes versus the South PUD. So
Uh-huh.
this is the one proposed for Norton. And both of these do have that 800
Okay.
already in there.
Okay.
For south for offsite parking. And I can tell you the way a lot of our platted lots work. We seldom have on-site parking for our commercial or retail uses. We sometimes do, like the rentals office, that parking lot in the back is actually on that lot. On a lot of our condo buildings, the parking on the circle side is within the right of way, but the parking on the back side of those condos are on the condo lot. So like half of them of the assigned spots are within the lot and half of them were assigned out of the parking like along its frontage.
Mhm.
So for a lot of the existing community, if this language isn't used, we'd probably not be compliant just because that language has already been in there with the way the existing phases were
Okay.
constructed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That was a question that I had.
We have any additional questions?
No,
Or
on that
comments?
specifically, my question was lodging defined as what?
Yeah.
Yeah, so lodging, let's see. Historically, we've defined lodging, I think, as anything that's exclusively for short-term living. So lodging premises available for short-term human habitation, including daily and weekly letting. So that's within the South PUD. In this version, I'm gonna see if the definitions say. Basically, hotel uses, I think, or bed and breakfast potentially. Premises available for short-term human habitation, including daily and weekly letting. So our lodging definition is the same between these two. The areas that I've made changes here were under retail. I added and services just because I felt like that wasn't necessarily covered. If you wanted to like do nails or cut hair or something, I couldn't quite tell where that was covered under this, so I added services there under retail. And then under civic, and this was part of the language that was proposed when we were looking at the hotel and conference center. We put conventions and organized meeting or events under that use as a definition there. To include it, and then under recreational civic, we added like sports, pedestrian thoroughfares, ponds. And conference and convention uses, we also added under urban center and urban core or meeting rooms. So yeah, lodging is like hotel or bed and breakfast uses.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that single family houses used as short-term rentals.
Right.
Meet your definition.
Yeah.
of lodging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so under residential, and this definition remains the same. We have premises available for long-term human habitation by means of ownership and rental, but not excluding short-term letting as owners. So short-term rental is covered under single family use.
Okay.
Just wanted that out loud in the minutes.
Yeah.
And then to your point there on the civic definition, is that only for nonprofit organizations,
I don't-
conventions, organized meetings or events? That portion was added. Is it the intention for it to only be not for profit?
I don't think so, no. If we need to clarify that, we certainly can.
I mean, I'm not sure that it would ever be a big issue here, but somebody could make it one.
Could you just remove the not-for-profit and just have organizations like?
Yeah, it depends on whether you subscribe, I think, to Oxford commas or not. I'm trying to decide
Yeah.
Hard.
how to
I know.
read this right now.
Is it nonprofit organization?
Oh, I-
Yeah.
Not-for-profit organizations,
Comma.
religion, arts, culture and education, government, social services, transit, conventions, and organized meetings.
I'm sure someone somewhere would try to make that
You
argument
could
that
put a
it's,
comma right
yeah.
after not-for-profit.
I think we have one. Is there another,
Or-
maybe it's written somewhere else?
Yeah, but after organization.
Maybe. Maybe
a semicolon.
don't list not for profit first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the only
Yeah.
way you get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart. I think we can move that to the end of the list.
And I think that's small enough to
Yeah.
not necessarily be in the motion.
Stand out.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
small enough change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Grammatical.
I wanted to clarify maybe the fourth little paragraph down in that same chapter that additional restrictions in our governance for allowable uses exist through applicable associations, blah, blah, blah. That is meant in only a more restrictive way, not a less restrictive way in this PUD document.
In which area?
Maybe above, right above residential. That
Okay,
paragraph?
additional restrictions in our governments.
Okay. It is C4.
Got you. Yeah, so the intention there
So
is I also have to like get this through our owners and make sure that they're not confused by what this means. And that if this document says that, hey, you can operate I don't know, a hotel on a particular lot or something. But then our association documents say that is for proposed future condo, development or something like that. This is basically stating that this doesn't override or supersede any other documentation that may be more restrictive.
Okay, and
That's our
that's what I was just trying to clarify for everybody here. They can have these additional things that are more restrictive than this document,
Right.
not less restrictive,
Mhm.
similar to city regulations versus state law.
Okay.
We can be more restrictive and then they can even be more restrictive.
Like, I know it came up during a recent meeting, there was a comment about another Mr. Nice Guys or something opening somewhere. Like, we have a association or the retail association that says that you can't operate a shop like that within the community. Things like that.
Okay.
They're not
Yeah.
standard city guidance, but they can be more restrictive
Mhm.
than that,
Gotcha.
more restrictive than what's in this PUD document, not less.
Gotcha. Okay,
All right.
we have any other questions?
I just wanted to go back to my comment. It's on page 10. Where it specifically talks about the side yard homes. The very last sentence says 5 foot of property lines, but no specific restriction shall limit the fenestration present on these walls. And that's a direct
C6.
conflict with, C6, I'm sorry,
C6.
the IRC.
Mhm.
Section 302.1 of the IRC.
So I think I'm definitely open to changing that. I wanted to include, this is a new section and these are new pages.
Mhm.
For that matter, but I included them because we have had some issues in the past. And I wanted to try to kind of clean that up in the
Mhm.
presentation of this. Particularly with like cantilevering, or there have been areas where like along our dune line with like we've allowed greater cantilevers than would typically be
Mhm.
allowable when you're butting up to a neighboring
dune.
developable property.
Mhm.
But when you're butting up against a undevelopable property or something that's already like within our association as a park or open space, we've allowed you to, build a little bit closer to it or things like that, as long as you're still within your property. In the case of the side yard homes, I know that if you look on that map actually up there, all those along the highway along Fish Hook. So those are developed as side yard homes. I drove by and looked at some of those earlier. Many don't have any windows on the side of the home, some do. Doesn't look like we have street view on that one.
Let's see if we can get it from over
There's
here.
specific building code that talks about how many windows, what percentage of wall space. you
Right,
have.
and it's very few, like we ran
It's
into that.
10% if I'm not
One,
mistaken.
I think it's 20.
Is it 20?
Well, it depends on if it's on the property line, it's 0. So,
If it's any
It-
closer than 5 feet to the property line,
Oh.
I think
Yeah,
some additional
so
restrictions. come
up to 3 feet, you can do 25%. And after 3 feet, it's 0.
Okay.
So if you are located, that firewall is located on the property line. Now, again, I don't think you can go back and change what you've done. But in an effort to clean it up and be cognizant of the code, 2024 IRC is actually changing. They're gonna, prior to that, they set a building line separation between the 2 units, like say it was on the same lot. And you could set it wherever you wanted. Well, 2024 is coming out with very specific what you can and can't do cantilevered. So in an effort to clean this up and let it live in the future, If you just refer to building codes, then it takes the pressure off of everybody to meet that. So then that way you're really bound by the IRC. And if the building official wants to make a provision that he says you can do that, then that's his liability and he could do that. So
So
But
it's
we're not using 2024 presently, we're using.
2018, which is in 2018, says the same thing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, 2024 is taking what you can and can't do right now, but they're adding more detail,
So
with,
I guess-
especially with relation to a single lot.
with respect to the fire code, though, if it meets, I mean, the whole purpose of a PUD is to try to do things in a unique way, granted, obviously, safety
Mhm.
in mind. That's why we're talking about so many of the parking in the streets, and the fire we know is a big concern. But if we're presently following something that they've done in the past that we know you can cantilever, and that there are provisions that can be made in the field building that are reviewed by the city, it just seems like it'd be an extra step and unnecessary to just go back and change it all right now and say that it has to adhere to 2024, 2018.
No, I don't think that's what we're saying. We're saying that what has been done in the past is
Mhm.
based on the PUD documents, but it doesn't actually meet code. So if all they do is change theirs to say it has to meet the current adopted building codes, then it takes all of that out instead of them specifying in here.
But then every time there's an
And
update on a building code, we're gonna have to redo the PUD document.
No,
And
the
if-
PUD document is only referring to the building code.
But if,
It doesn't refer to the specifics.
I think it does the reverse of that.
Mhm.
What it
I
does is
think
it
so, yeah.
prevents us from having to go back
Yeah.
and modify the code as the building code shows, or modify the PUD
Yeah.
as it.
Yeah.
the building code changes.
Yeah.
So we just be
Haven't looked
referencing
into
like.
Just because you've done it
Yes,
doesn't
yeah.
mean you can
Yeah.
continue to do it.
So we're not gonna
So-
reference specific 2018 or 2024.
No,
Thank you. Yeah.
no.
Just
What I'd like to do is.
Your language is
That I
perfect.
come back with a modified version of this sheet and work with Nicole and the building official to verify that they're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That language, and I think I simplify this instead of calling out specific things. Like, these are the things that we wish to be allowable so long as they comply with applicable building codes. And
Yeah.
then like.
well, not only, because in some instances, they're not gonna comply with
Right.
applicable building codes.
Okay.
Based on if you're on the side yard, you can't have those windows and openings.
Right.
But the building official can approve the spirit of everything being met by these plats that have additional side yards. So you still have the separation, the fire code separation that you're looking for in the building codes without meeting the letter of the building codes. And I had an extensive conversation with our building official about it, and we have instances of this other places in town where he overrides that building code, not in a way to make it unsafe, but in a way to make it make sense with the master plan of that area.
Like for instance, when you have a house
You wouldn't need
on
all the safety.
pilings and you have the deck that comes down in the side yard, that's not allowed per code. The building official can approve it. Does that make sense? So if you're referring to just building code, then that still allows the building official to override anything, but it takes it out of your PUD document.
Right.
And then there's also provisions where he can write a very simple letter that says, these are the things that I will allow within your PUD document, within your PUD boundary to go over a setback. So that way it's consistent.
Why wouldn't we want that in the PUD though?
Because you don't want the PUD directing building code like that. You want the building official
So
to
what
do
if
it.
they build half of Cinnamon Shore and then we change building officials and he says,
That's why you want the building official to do it and not in the PUD document.
Hmm.
So, and typically they'll write it could be some sort of an amendment, internal amendment. I mean, like I said, the same thing with the side steps going up to a house. You know, that decking is not allowed within 3 feet of a side property line, but we do it all the time.
Hmm.
So, and that's kind of something that's been done all over town. That's allowed, and it's allowed in our code. It's not allowed in the building code. I just know it's getting ready to get more strict, and if we adopt, and I don't know when we're gonna adopt the next set of codes.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe some clarity on what you propose we would change with this documentation.
I would just say that one instance, and anything else that has something code specific, say refer to approved building codes.
Refer to approved building codes
That we're gonna.
that were, yeah.
Well, okay, so as
So
a
that
design
we should
professional,
Put in, but the city can then review and.
no, we don't put that in. I
We
mean,
don't put
the
that in.
building official
Then-
the building official can override anything.
Yeah.
But if a client came to me and said, I want you to design my house on this lot, and I said, okay, I'm bound by the code. I'm bound by what it says specifically in this PUD document and what it says specifically in the IRC. I cannot override that. The developer cannot override that. The only person that can is the building official. So by updating the PUD document to specifically say, refer to the building code, then it takes a liability off of the developer, the builder, everybody. It says, we're gonna do everything per code. And then if the building official says, hey, in this section, I'm going to allow these 3 things to overhang that or I'm gonna allow you to do 2 windows per lot, on that property. I'm gonna allow you to do this. It's a letter specifically from the building official. He's the only one that can override the building
But the
code.
PUD is a proposal for all intents and purposes, so that if you don't put it in the proposal, the building official's not gonna come back and go, you know what, I'm gonna give you 2 extra windows up here, even though you didn't ask for it. So if you restrict that in the PUD, the PUD should be presented to everybody as a proposal. And if and you're right, the building official can't override city code. But if it's not there to begin with, then there's nothing to override. They're not gonna, I mean, how would that work? They say, I know, here's our document and it's not in here, but I really would like 2 extra windows over here. Can you make that happen?
Well, then
So-
it's typically a letter for a section so the building official has the ability to interpret and override in different situations. But when it comes to liability, when it comes to fire code, when it comes to insurance purposes, we are bound by the codes that are adopted for.
When you say we are these architects,
Mhm.
so, and so when you're talking about liability, you're talking about something
And the
like your
developer-
E&O? I mean,
Yeah.
because you could be sued because the color of your house is.
Right, but it's
don't
also,
like-
it's also the developer, it's also the builder.
Hmm.
It ties everything together.
I don't see how saying that you're
Putting it 100%
on the building official,
Mhm.
that'll change on a regular basis.
Mhm.
That
And then-
doesn't make me really comfortable.
Mhm.
I mean, they'd probably want to get paid 3 times as much before they'd say yes.
Well, and
Well, not
the-
only that, if you lose a building official and,
The-
there's some liability
Mm.
issue that.
the
comes up
other-
10 years later,
We have a city.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, basically that exposes the city.
Yeah.
what I worry more about is the inconsistency that could arise.
well, and I worry about approving something that doesn't meet code. I mean, we don't have any provisions in our code that overrides the IRC. We've adopted it. That's what everything has to be built under. And so,
I don't know. So the way that it's currently set up, and if it's being reviewed by the building official, it seems like
it's not,
we're,
though.
when it comes to the fire side, it is. And that's where your biggest concern is with all of this, right? But yes, but it doesn't happen at this stage. It happens at the planning stage and it happens at the city stage, the development.
I think
Mhm.
I think if we want to go down the path of leaving that out, I don't think I would say, I don't think I would put in meets applicable building codes, because we know that the intention is to not,
Well, part of the reason for a PUD is so you
is
can
to
have your,
not,
to not-
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
so
I don't know if that's a bigger question of we need to write something into our ordinance that allows that change to happen. That does amend that portion of the building code in these master planned communities.
Yeah, I think I would do some checking into that. Because from a development standpoint, I mean, I don't think the intention is from anybody involved to do something that is gonna create a liability
Oh,
on
I mean,
anybody's
100%.
situation.
I don't,
Could we make a motion with changes and say, and we also strongly recommend that you review that whatever you're building falls in line with the applicable building codes at the time?
That's exactly what I just said.
Well, it seemed like you were saying a lot more, but say, but
No,
make
just-
that in a recommendation that they do it, but not a requirement.
So just take that out and say it's per building codes. It's recommended per building
I just
codes.
don't even know why we say that.
or just take out that line
Take it out altogether.
and let the building official approve it the way that he would approve it. That would be, I think, the way that I would want it written in there, rather than writing something in there that says you have to meet all building codes, and then our building official says, you know.
Mhm.
Because that exposes to an extreme amount of liability right there.
Mhm.
I think we were like halfway through building, like there were 6 or 7 out of maybe 10 of those fishhook homes that were constructed at the time when the building official, I think, changed, or they just started looking more closely at these or something and started to realize like, hey, actually by the code, you're not supposed to have windows when it's on that 0 lot line. And then they started trying to make that the scenario for those remaining homeowners that were trying to build. And they were like, oh, well, I bought an existing set of plans that the architects already developed. You know, we're fully to this stage where we're looking to do it. Those are my windows from my bedroom or whatever, like, and we have the necessary fire separation. The lot was planned under these scenarios. And then the building official, I think, ended up allowing it. But because it was clear that things were kind of rocky on that front, I drafted this language when we were doing that 2020 iteration to try to strengthen our ability to propose this kind of side yard setback configuration, which is this upper left sort of diagram
Mhm.
where you've got a home on the property line on one side. You're just taking those 2 5-foot side yards and putting them all on the one side of the home. And we've talked about other ways to kind of overcome that, where maybe you do a typical lot configuration with 5-foot side yards, but you write a access easement that deeds your neighbor's 5-foot side yard over to you to make it part of your yard. But then we had owners who were like, well, if I bought that and that's technically his property and I break my leg on that piece of property, like, am I
It
gonna
feels like
sue
it
him?
feels like a really complicated workaround to get what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
And in no instance is fire code going to be ignored. The building separation is still there. It's just in these.
So these are all issues that we traditionally deal with 0 lot line lots all over Texas. I mean, this is nothing new for Cinnamon Shore. So this is also something that this is the only development I've ever seen that has allowed any fenestration or any openings whatsoever on a 0 lot line side. So I'm sitting here saying from a liability standpoint, you finished what you had and that's great. But going forward, I would urge you to rethink the fenestration issue.
yeah. I don't know that right now we don't have any side yards drawn in our proposed future.
I probably wouldn't if I were you.
With that, any other questions? Can I invite a motion?
Hang on.
Oh,
No. Page C7
shut down.
about signs, sorry.
Oh, yes, the sign.
Oh,
I'm afraid I have a
Yeah.
question. Sorry in advance.
So.
And I am currently working on a redesign of the city sign ordinances
Okay.
in general, where some of these things that you guys have added in and not typically used that I'm aware of, is something that we may or may not be trying to get rid of in the city.
Okay.
So,
What page, Nicole?
I can give you-
C7.
I have a
So,
brief on this page. if
yeah,
that's gonna help.
I feel like not much is different. I mean, some of the size requirements and stuff are different than what kind of standard city signs are. And the philosophy that we've taken for signs and PUDs previously is kind of the same as the setback issues on the exterior of the PUDs. So anything that's kind of visible from the exterior of the PUD, we, apply our sign ordinance to. Anything interior of the PUD, I'm less less inclined to really regulate because that's their, you know, their ambiance that they're going for, whatever signs they would like to include there, they should be able to. So my big kind of ask for this from a city staff standpoint would be that those feather flags, those banners, those different kinds of things are just used internally and not on public right away, not facing public right away.
So,
That way we don't have 100 feather flags on 361.
I mean, I'm not opposed to that idea if you're considering it, you know, citywide.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
supportive of that and we can, you know.
Not saying you can't go use them on the grand lawn or, you know, anything in there that makes sense for you. But externally, I think that we would like to have that be the same as kind of city rules.
Okay,
so then in the motion, would we specifically address feather flags or say?
I would
So long
say-
as they adhere to a city signed ordinance for the
I would say
public
probably
facing?
anything
Any signage.
anything adjacent to non-PUD boundaries, kind of use the same language that we use in our setback issues.
Okay.
And it's hard to do on the fly, but
right. I think that could work. So on the sign sizing and stuff, our entrance monument signage is really the stuff I'm most concerned with. That's on those frontages. As well as anything we might use for kind of a special event, just to indicate if we're hosting one of the you know, October, I'm not calling it the wrong thing. What is the October music?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think we're,
Over-
yeah, I mean, we're not trying to, yeah.
Oktoberfest. I was gonna call
Yeah.
it Surftoberfest, but that's it, Surf Club.
And I don't think the city, regulations on this is gonna take away from your ability to do that. It's just gonna make it that you can't put out 50 signs for
Right.
that thing,
And-
right? You one or two, and that's what you
I
want.
think,
And
I think the
that's,
path that we're going down with the city
Yeah.
signage is based on frontage.
yeah.
So obviously you guys have a lot of frontage there that you would be able to accommodate, I think, the things that you want. What we're trying to prevent is 25 feather flags, 13 banners.
The aesthetics of your development
Yeah.
are
On the fence.
top notch.
Yeah,
We're
it
not-
already follows what we're
Just
going after, so.
Basically, kind of keep doing what you're doing. You know?
Just so you follow the city sign ordinances on the visible part.
Yeah, the
On
public
the,
facing side.
yeah, the
Yes,
boundaries, yeah.
what you do internally is different, but
That makes sense.
So specifically feather flags, we're looking for something other than as appropriate, maybe one per something. Linear feet of frontage.
well, and we're working
think-
on that
yeah.
on the sign ordinance.
I think the,
Mm-hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, I think the wording should be more like the signage that's on what adjacent to the non-PUD areas should follow city regulation.
Yeah.
Or-
Because feather flags might not be an
Yeah.
option at all.
Yeah,
In city regulations. And so to allow Cinnamon Shore to have that on 361 and not allow, you know,
yeah.
IGA to have that on Alistair it's a hard pill for me to swallow.
So I'm thinking temporary signage, or we create some language that captures this sort of signage along non-PUD frontages. Or something like that, because if we're thinking permanent signage, like that's my monument signage.
Yeah, you're worried about, yeah,
And
that's
I'm
different, yeah.
intending to
Yeah.
not comply with the, like, I'm presenting this as what I'm wishing to comply.
I would
with.
I would imagine it's just in that miscellaneous sign.
Okay, so miscellaneous signs.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the rest of it's all pretty appropriate.
That's the
There's
one I have concerns about, the miscellaneous, right?
There's
Like
some
the
big-
rest is,
some
yeah.
bigger sign allowances in there than we would allow for typical residential lots and stuff, but that's internal.
Yeah.
And that's, if that's the aesthetic they want, that should be the aesthetic they are allowed to have.
Sure.
And something that it doesn't really specify in here, your signage is really nice the way it is, but is lighted signs. So how you light the signs up, we're not doing, I don't expect to see a big neon sign driving down in a Cinnamon Shore, but
Correct, yeah, and I think we're determining what we, like, how we typically light stuff. So Palmia's sign is, I'll call it like halo lit.
yeah.
And that's the way our signs are at both north and south. The
Mhm.
ones at north, we built first. They're smaller than the ones at South.
Mhm.
They're built right up to the property line. They're in the water district easement.
Mhm.
The ones at South sit behind the water district easement, so they're 20 foot back from the highway, so that's why they're a little bit bigger. Is they're further away from the road and we wanted them to try to be, like adequately visible. Both of those, I came, worked with city staff and I think P and Z to get approval on like the size and location of those and like the style of lighting at the time when we applied. I'm using this to try to kind of codify those requests so that I don't have to come back the next time I need to build a highway sign and request to do the same thing I did before. I just, I still apply and say that I'm constructing a sign and I've got engineering on it and all of those things, but it complies with the rules set here, therefore city staff can easily approve it and it doesn't have to receive a separate approval. Lighting is a good question. I haven't given it too much thought thus far, so I don't probably have it written in here.
And so anytime something like that is not written into a PUD, you go to kind of typical city standards that would apply in that situation.
And it does say, but does not authorize such signs to be constructed or erected without first obtaining its approval.
Right, and a permit.
And I added that to kind of indicate that I'm not looking to just, I can build signs everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Or whatever. I'm like still planning to come in and apply for these signs when we're constructing them. I just want to know that these are the rules we agreed by which we can construct signs.
And part of the new sign ordinance is better enforcement of the signage that needs permitting. So our ordinance is very specific about what signs don't need permitting. There's a lot of signs that I see going up, specifically real estate construction signs that should be permitted that have historically not been. So that will be a change that I think we'll see.
And I think keep in mind, whenever you go forward and do your permit for a sign, kind of look at our ordinance once it's done and try and stay in the parameters.
Sure.
I think that needs to
Yeah.
be understood because we're doing this sign ordinance for a reason. So everything's more uniform.
Consistent.
I think the only other question I had that I wanted just a little extra clarification was the property boundary monument signs and what your plan is there.
Yeah, so we haven't had those in a very, very long time. I don't know, do you know if Google Earth under the historical thing does historical street view?
It does not.
Okay.
I wish it did.
So I
'Cause-
was curious if it did historical street map. So I have photos of it, pre-Harvey. We used to have, it was like a 6x6 post with a little, probably 18-inch by 18-inch sort of wooden flag presented in the direction of our property at both the north and south corners of Cinnamon Shore. It was probably 4 foot tall and it had the umbrella on a little piece of wood. After Harvey, those were already kind of rotting and needed repainting. We just ripped them out of the ground. We never reconstructed them. But I wanted to have the ability, if we ever wish to go add sort of a monument at the start of our property. Which now we have like a fence at South or whatever, kind of where the property starts and ends, so it's pretty obvious. But add some kind of like little monument that indicates that like this to this is Cinnamon Shore. Or kind of boundaries it, and with that might include the sections along the beach as well, so it's kind of clear, because a lot of the time we end up getting comments from folks at Casa or El Cortez that are saying we've set up chairs or umbrellas in front of their property. City staff has to come out and like investigate
Measure
that
stuff.
to see whether or not that's true. Some of our staff, we try to train everyone. I'm not part of that department, but they try to train them. They often give them mile markers as an indicator. Those aren't exactly lined up with our property boundaries. So it's often confusing for that staff to understand where they're permitted to set up chairs and umbrellas and where they're not. And so we're trying to kind of confine that boundary to say from here to here, this is the area that is in front of the Cinnamon Shore.
And so those property boundary monuments, are you talking about closer up to the property or closer up to the beach?
Probably to be visible. And I don't have any plans to do it today, but I wrote it in there because it's something that I've encountered as a problem. And I see that might be a solution to that problem.
How big are the beach markers?
12 by 12.
Well, they're replacing them now with those new ones they're replacing
They-
are very sizable,
They're-
actually.
The posts are bigger, the
Yeah.
signs aren't that much
Okay.
bigger, but they're on.
It's like an 8x8 post or something, I believe, or
I mean, they're pretty,
maybe a 10 by
It might be
10.
10 by 10.
Yeah, they're pretty.
they're pretty substantial posts. I don't know, I'm not a great judge of how big something is when down.
They're
at it.
taller as
I would
well.
Say it's probably, I mean, they're probably
It's about 12 by 12.
12 by
Yeah.
12 is what I would imagine. I don't think they're bigger than that.
Posts are not going in.
Yeah, definitely not.
I
Tell
mean,
them.
along the roadway, I think that's fine, but along the beach, I mean, if we approve that, then are we gonna end up with everybody putting their signs up on the beach side?
What do you mean, everybody?
I mean, they're like, oh, well, Cinnamon Shore did it. Why can't we?
Also
put-"
comes in
Again,
doses.
Yeah,
$10, I mean,
you know, it just kind of opens it up.
Difficult because you have to remember the people south of 1A own all the way to mean high tide.
Mhm.
So not everybody could do it. Nobody north of that could.
Mhm.
They wouldn't have the same stipulations. And I would say that this would probably be something very similar to the mobile vending and setting a precedent. They're a PUD. It allows that higher use based on the master plan of everything. I could see how signs on the beach could be very problematic and could become a very political thing. You know,
Have to get
they,
approved by the Duke permit or
yeah,
something.
I mean, it
Yeah.
does have to get approved by a dune permit,
Wow.
a sign
That'll-
in that area, so I think that that's
Exactly.
probably where we hit the political kind of, like, where where we can take a pass on the
Mhm.
politicalization of it right now and
Uh-huh.
say, let planning and zoning and city council in the future, when they're ready to put these signs out, discuss that issue then.
Mhm.
and then that would be a permitted item, right?
Correct,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right,
Is this the property boundary monument that we're just?
yeah.
Yes.
So
Right,
I
and I
don't
did
know,
find this image that I just share, so that's, I knew I
We
could
just have
find
to
it in
be
my
careful.
Harvey images.
I've got
but
zero
that's what
issue with
property
it
Boundary
being
monument.
not
used
beach
to
side.
look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
major reservations with.
Beach size, yeah.
Certainly not
Yes.
offensive.
No.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Got it.
I see what you're,
But it's not, I mean, it's.
I think I remember
the
those actually.
portion Of it that I definitely want to stay away from because.
Yeah, I don't like the beach side.
Well, and it makes sense. I mean, I understand trying to set up and trying to be, you know, and everybody's like, oh, well, oh yeah, I remember those two.
Out of curiosity, then if all I'm looking to do is to address like our own staff's ability to identify our property boundary, would you be open to something that's like not marked really in any way, like it's a wooden post
Mhm.
that's, I don't know,
It's
just
like a property.
painted
boundary.
white on the top, something
So-
that
I
looks
got a-
like a city?
I got a question. So what would be the benefit of your staff being able to tell exactly where your property
So
boundary?
that they can't set up chairs on somebody else's property.
Okay, because their property goes to, I thought, I got you. Okay,
So right
Okay.
now, it's
Yeah.
easy in north because we
Yeah.
have a home anchoring the north end and the south end,
Mhm.
but as soon as we say start going to the beach access.
Yeah.
Road or whatever, and we don't have homes developed there, like it's harder to identify
Mm.
at south, like where there's no Gulf front home constructed right next to Gulf Waters.
Mm.
Where that boundary. comes
Gotcha,
south.
yeah.
So we did have that
Okay.
discussion with some of the staff there from Cinnamon Shore when Carly and I went down to talk to them about the distances that they needed to keep, and we were amenable to putting some kind of non-branded marker
Okay.
out there to help both them and us and your neighbors.
So that's probably something that we don't even need in here to be
Well,
indicated, so we can restrict this to highway frontage, and then the rest is like, it seems like staff's.
Internal.
Yeah,
Or I mean.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just so the monuments aren't there, so. The average Joe can still use that. property.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, if you.
I
start-
don't, I don't.
We
want to-
understand that the developers understand the Open Beaches Act and everything. We would not want owners to be like, we'll see that, it's our.
Yes, that,
yeah,
that's what I'm afraid would happen. You see that marker and that marker, you can't. You
Right.
know,
yeah.
Yes.
It opens
Right.
up all
We know that
kinds of,
Cinnamon Shore staff understands
Yeah.
that Cinnamon
Yeah.
Shore staff wouldn't be the ones to do that.
right,
You know.
but you got,
some
property
people-
owners and people staying there don't know the rules, so. Is there any issues with the property boundary monument being 16 feet tall, maximum height? No.
I have no issue.
Again, I would say that it's probably text dot more than anything,
Mhm.
wouldn't it?
On the beach side?
No.
No, this is, I think we've already solved the beachside issue.
It's all gonna be on private property, so text.
Mm.
Yeah, text.
Yeah.
doesn't have-
Yep.
No.
Yeah, even our like wayfinding signage, we're designing some of that right now and we're proposing for the top of those signs to be at 5 foot.
Okay, yeah.
So I think these
Yeah.
are like, I'm asking for the sky.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
easier to say,
Really
Yeah.
maybe there's
Yeah.
one somewhere
Yeah.
that they would want to be taller. It's easier to just put that minimum everywhere.
Okay.
Or that maximum everywhere, I guess.
Richard, you just saw a question.
No, I think
So I do want to talk about building heights.
Sure.
In the original Cinnamon Shore HUD here, the building heights was obviously much less,
Yeah, like 35 feet, mean roof
three
line.
stories, where we're, going to some 4 and 12 stories. So I just wanted to point that out, that is a pretty massive change.
And that's
So,
urban. Is it
That's-
urban or suburban? Or both?
it's
I
urban.
think it's both.
T5 is urban center, and so that would be kind of an
That's-
increase from a 3-story maximum to a
Right.
4-story maximum. And urban core, which right now in this plan is just that area that they discussed as maintenance, utilitarian kind of uses for right now. But because it's zoned,
Okay.
And we have
And-
no plans to construct like 12-story habitable or other kind of structure on that lot for that type of use, but the way that our design code treats stories, it doesn't define like what that plate height has to be,
Mm.
and we're talking about maybe, we don't have the plans for it yet, but doing some kind of stacked cart storage facility and doing like a minimum, like kind of plate height for those carts. So if we're doing like 8-foot plates and putting like 6 stories of 8-foot plates, it's not going to appear really out of scale with any of the other structures,
Mhm.
but it's technically 6 stories like of cart storage stacked on top of one another or something like that. So that's why I've used that kind of T6, because it's our most entitled use. So that's why it's been indicated for that property, is because it also includes things like manufacturing, which, while I don't consider us to be manufacturing anything, someone might say that, hey, putting bumpers on a golf cart, you're assembling it, you're manufacturing it, or
Right.
something like that. So I'm trying to just CYA that like that lot is as entitled as a lot within our community can get. And so I've indicated T6 for that parcel. Anything else within the community, we have on top of this a design code document, which I didn't bring a copy of, but used to be part of the original HUD document. So all of this back here defines like the architectural styling and look and feel.
That's
of
the current one?
community. So
that
there
one, that one's from
are-
2019.
This one, last amendment I see was from May of 2018 on top here, maybe, but
So
the
this-
design code is from 2007.
Which in your packets, some of it's in the packet.
Okay, so you
So they have
have this kind of in the packet. So we have a adopted newer design code. Since then, we have one design code document that covers both the north and south properties. But both of them have what we call a like regulating plan. So it's a map that shows the types of uses on like rear loaded houses, side yard houses, mixed use buildings, whole front homes. All of those within our community, they get like a 2-letter indicator. It's a rear loaded home RL3-H or whatever. And the letter at the end is the height category. And so we have various height categories within the community. Within north, everything that's like over there, we're looking to maintain that existing kind of development density, and like the few unbuilt homes intend to follow the same restrictions that were set for their neighbors within our design code document. So there's all these layered, like, this is the most broad 30,000 foot view, as Nicole put it, and then we have this one that tells you like specifically where you have to store your trash can.
Right.
Like, so it gets way stricter from there.
And what's the
And,
process to change that?
So we have the ability to amend this. We record it with the, like, there's a bit more defined versions that show kind of those, but we have the ability to amend that and record it with the community association. So it becomes like a recorded document with the county and on file with them, and then gets pulled with their kind of deed restrictions for each individual lot. So we have the design code recorded as a deed restriction on the property. Now, it's one of the documents that we as the developer, like, have the ability to amend and to do so and reserve the right to do so kind of without, you know, votes from the community members and things like that, because it's one of those areas. If we have unbuilt property that we've not yet developed and we indicated how we intended to develop it, but then made changes to that, like, we don't want to have to receive approval from our ownership to be able to do that. So it's one of the ones that we have broad authority to regulate on, but
Okay, so that being said, with this transact allowing a 12-story building and that transact being approved by this PUD document, I know it's not your intention to build that right now, but that gives you the ability to do that.
it would. And if that's an area that you have concerns on, I'm open to hearing what you feel would be a more reasonable request, and we can. What I'd like to do, and we've done in the past, as Stephen mentioned, is we leave the 12-story as the PUD doc, like what's written in the PUD. And then that gives us the ability where it exists elsewhere in the PUD, like I know on the Bay property within the Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD. We have a parcel that has that designation. So it wouldn't change the zoning on, say, that property, but we could go indicate on this property that we're setting some lower height limit.
Just to apply to that one particular.
But if this is the only T6 property,
So
would
like
there
it's
be any
south-
benefit in doing that?
Our phase 6 pool site is labeled as T6.
Well, why wouldn't you just give a maximum height and then you can divide it among
That-
how many stories you want?
Because even at 8 foot plate, it's still gonna be 110 feet or so for a 12 foot.
Yeah.
I mean, a 12-story building.
Right, if we were to do, 12 stories.
So I,
Depending on- but-
and in your previous design code, you have maximum heights. You have, it's listed as stories, but you also have maximum heights in there. You know, 35 feet, 55 feet, 65 feet.
And
for-
Just a question, but if this is the only T6 available for you to build on, is it the only one that's available to
It's,
build on?
it's the only one, it's the only unbuilt one, it's the only one we've colored within the
Okay.
PUD for that.
So, and you don't intend to do a 12-story, why would you ask for that?
I mean,
Just
what's,
that it's
Because it's the same
maximum
as-
element. So it's not uncommon that. All I've learned in the 8 years now that I've been at Cinnamon Shore, this is my 9th year, and then in the time that I was at Urban prior to that, and I was working on these, is everything is guaranteed to change. The
Right.
plans for it, when I worked on the Palmia stuff, on all of them. So asking for more than I need on that lot gives me the ability to kind of cave and horse trade for something less. Here, so I was asking for more than I needed here, and I can.
But in that case, you're also asking for something similar to what you set up in Cinnamon Shores South or.
Correct. Like, I have that designation on this. I have that designation on a lot in the south, right?
That's
So-
on a
hotel.
highway facing lot?
It's not a highway facing lot. Yeah, it's closer to the Gulf Run.
So while this is a change from the original PUD, it's not a significant change from the Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD. Is
Correct.
Okay.
Except for
Except for the
the,
topics.
except for the highway frontage, it's non-PUD, you know, it's adjacent to non-PUD.
Yeah,
I guess one concern from changing that transect zone height would be the next time we come back with some type of PUD and we've got T6 in there, we would want to have to default back to this one where we only had 6 stories instead of the 12. It's like, once you kind of lower the bar, sometimes it stays there. So
So solution here to prevent my fear from sometime in the future, a 12-story building being built next to Highway 361 would
Right.
be what? What would you suggest? Putting a specific lot restriction on this?
Yeah, I think what I would do, I don't have, I think a version like this, but what we've done on some of these maps where we have this little setback zone, what we'll do is we'll shade that lot. With a little
Hatch.
setback or like kind of hatch on it. And then indicate that either a foot or stories height or a feet height limit lesser than the 12 stories that's written into the PUD. I'd like to keep the 12-story language there so that in the future, as we expand either to the south, which might be in this document, it might be that it's an entirely different PUD. It's currently a different PUD and we'll probably leave it that way. But we could annex that into this. I just want the language there in case we plan to do a taller building.
Sounds
But
reasonable.
I don't foresee that we don't plan to currently. So right now I'm thinking that like 55 feet has been a height limit we kind of used for some other things that were in excess of kind of 35. That's about the scale of a lot of our town center kind of buildings. Is this kind of 55, 60 foot mean roof line height? I think a height like that would be adequate for this lot.
Okay.
Are there any reservations with that? I might like to put a bit of margin on it if that doesn't feel like it's too close for you guys, maybe 80 feet or something. That just gives me a bit of flexibility on it.
I'm comfortable with 60.
60.
I am as well. 55, 60.
Yeah, 55,
Seems
That's
easy to
that's
agree to.
that's like all those lawns around
Yeah.
the circle or all those buildings around
Yeah.
the circle there, their roofs.
Yeah.
Kind of in that 55.
And that keeps, yeah, it keeps it all pretty much the same and
Okay. I think 60 feet works for that.
And then also on just the,
What is that 60 feet
from
from?
that is
Elevation.
for, was it D1?
Yeah.
Is that, is 60-foot mean roof height?
Yeah.
So the apex could be higher than 60,
Measured.
Yeah,
consistent with,
consistent with existing,
That's mean
Height.
BFE plus one.
or
I
How
would
we
say
measure.
don't say anything about how to measure height in that, because when it's not there in city standard measurements.
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
It gives y'all the ability to, yeah, dictate how to do it.
and then what about on,
So I think, and I need to discuss it further with David. I think that there might still be a little bit of pushback with, because it's a non-PUD boundary lot.
Right.
So just be ready for that pushback,
Okay.
from city manager, from city council, to maybe put some language in there that would adopt kind of the city's height regulations on those external
Okay.
lots too.
Yeah, in terms of setback, where the
The
higher you
that-
go, the more you push back.
Mhm.
And we'd be at least 20-foot minimum from the highway.
I think you
there.
guys could meet it with anything that you wanted to do there. I think that that's probably gonna be the wording that needs to be.
Should we put that wording in now?
should that be in the motion?
Yeah. If y'all are agreeable to it?
Because I haven't really looked at it to make sure that
Okay.
that's, I haven't looked at it.
Okay,
I need to look at it again after this conversation.
sure.
Look at the 60 feet, see if that can be met, under that kind of wording that would be in there. So
Okay.
I'm hesitant to write that in exactly
Sure.
right now, and then to just bring that up at a city council
Okay.
decision. Because again, this is three times.
Yeah.
This is done for ordinance, so it's 3 readings at city council where we can further discuss kind of all of these issues
Sure.
and see what they say as well.
But it'll be made known that P and Z recommends 60 feet.
60 feet.
Mhm.
Okay.
and then on the residential side, can we have a max height on there as well?
I
We
think that would
have
be,
I
a-
think that's
We have it in the design code. It's
driven by stories. I would
It's
think.
listed by stories in the new PUD document, but in the design code, it's specified as building height.
Right.
right,
Yeah,
which is
so-
more, the design code is the more restrictive version of the PUD document,
Right.
But they can change it at any time.
correct? But they
So-
can't change stories.
Yeah, but you could have a 22-foot first floor and a 18-foot second floor. You wouldn't do that because that'd be weird. But the possibility is that, because it's helpful if you have a max height.
So Cinnamon Shore 2 PUD has a 3-story max, is that correct?
There's
Or
a
a
4-story.
T5?
I think it's 4.
It is 4?
It depends on the building type.
Yeah, so 4 for T5, 3 for T3 and 3 are in T4. Yeah, that's the primary stories. Then we have a thing and there's diagrams that are in here for half stories.
Yes.
And in our design code, we changed this to try to make the homes a little bit smaller in Cinnamon Shore South because we had folks that were constructing. So this diagram on sheet 9, there's this permissible improved attic and it has max stories, and then you're allowed to have an improved attic space above that maximum story. So if we have a 3-story home, a lot of our 3 stories are 3.5-story homes. And that half story, as long as X, which in the case of north is 3 feet, that stem wall around the perimeter, if it's 3 feet or shorter, it's not considered a story, it's a half wall. If it's above 3 feet, it becomes a full story and counts against the story requirement.
Right.
In south, we dropped that to 2 feet because people were putting such big improved attics. And it was ballooning like the square footage of the homes a lot of the time, and we're trying to push that number down.
Okay.
So I don't foresee that we're looking to continue with the trend of them being like larger like that, but I mean, this is the way it's written in our south. I would prefer not to change kind of the requirement. I'd like to try to kind of unify those.
That precedent has long ago been set. So
Yes.
By multiple PUD documents, Spoonbill Bay, Palmia,
Sure.
Sunflower, all of those are set by stories and not max height.
Yeah, so the language that's in the design code, the copy you've received is referenced because it's the existing PUD. So within that, it was written because we didn't feel at the time when it was applied for that we would get a higher height requirement, so we used that 35 and 55. At South, we felt that at the time, like things had changed. City was more understanding of what this new urban development, this mixed use, and like how the community was looking, and that we could go by the kind of stories direction instead of height. So at South, we don't use, a height limit. We still do have the language for North in the design code so that any new homes built there are consistent with the existing ones, but for property moving south from the beach access road, if we were to annex it, we're looking to move in the direction of the south regulation, which allows a little bit, it's less regulated on the height side. They're allowed to be a little bit taller.
In that they just don't have the building height? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
they don't list exclusively a height limit. So some of the other areas where we kind of cover that is these architectural embellishments. Like there's some Gulf front homes. One of them was on a recent, we do like a little internal magazine. I can find the photo of it, but it's a open air tower. There's even one along the highway frontage of South now that's been built. That's it's open air. It's got some blue shutters, I think, up there, and it's white. So 300 to 600 square feet is allowed to kind of push through that upper kind of story limit in certain areas as an anchor point at like the end of a street or something as an architectural embellishment. So that's written in our design code already. And because we've entered, situations before where the building official reviews it and goes, well, I'm averaging your mean roof height, and this looks to be a little bit higher than is permitted on that particular lot. We put it in the design or in the PUD amendment here so that hopefully we're codifying that we're allowed to do that, even though it didn't meet the city standard height requirements for those lots.
Right.
And that's where a lot of these photographic examples like try to kind of bring it back to reality, because I know a lot of that seems like asking for a lot, but we're asking to kind of flex the rules. But these homes and pictures kind of serve as illustrations for the way that actually comes to look when you're driving around the community. Like on this example of this home, this little like tower structure here, in that case, I don't think that's lined up with the center of the street, but I think a nearby walkway, that's kind of the architectural terminus at the end of that walkway. So we have a lot of these little structures for towers that kind of serve as that.
Most people walking around the community wouldn't even recognize a half story to begin with.
No.
They're not gonna know what they're looking at.
Yeah, it's usually kind of tucked up in the roof line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dormers and
Yeah.
things, windows up there that kind of give it that volume to some habitable space. this, like, for example, on these condo buildings, that's a half story. That top
Yeah.
area, those are 2-story units, and some of those have like a bedroom up there in that attic. And a
What is
space.
it? Did they, what's not in the?
Somebody taking notes?
I've got a, yeah.
Combine it with the
Steve,
I don't know
PUD.
if you're gonna be able to read my writing.
I mean, just on making the motion, we're trying to get you an approval, but we've got some, conditions that we have to propose.
Is there something in that they're trying to,
No,
that they're wanting to, improve and make more uniform?
I think just
So-
making, I think in hindsight, they probably would have gone with the planned unit development for all of Cinnamon Shore rather than doing a NUD and then a PUD. So I think they're just trying to kind of go back and capture that NUD and just make it part of the PUD.
Okay, I thought maybe there was something in the NUD.
That's just the
Yeah.
development avenue that was used to approve that first section of Cinnamon Shore. And then the PUD was used for the rest.
Right.
Like I said, in
I thought maybe
hindsight,
there was restrictions in the NUD that aren't in the PUD, and that's why they were.
well, there's NUDs are definitely less less allowable uses than PUDs by design, but that doesn't, I don't want that to sound like a negative.
No, I understand what you're
So
saying.
they're just trying to make it all one cohesive, same rules apply to everything in that.
That mobile vending thing
Is the
too, I'm
bigger-
trying to kind of redraw the boundaries so that, when it comes to defining. Like areas that can mobile vend, I'd hate to have to go like, well, this section, like phases 1 through 3 of the community, you're allowed to mobile vend. That food
This-
truck can't be in phase 4.
If you pass this line,
Yeah,
because
like
this is the
that starts
NUD
to
and
get
this is
Well, and you
the
do
PUD.
that in a lot of them too.
Right, so we're trying to kind of, make that easier to demonstrate by being all of North is kind of captured within this document, and then all of South exists within the other document.
Okay, I'm gonna just go through the last points that I wanted to make sure that we had on the record. So on C2, the area that we added in, that I know exactly why we added it in, but the prior to development or sale.
Yes.
The uses on that, will they be based on transect, or are you saying any use in any area?
I'm hoping to say any use in any area. Generally, we try to adhere to the transects, but sometimes, like, historically in Cinnamon Shore North, and it's just kind of off the edge of the image there, but. If you move, so we're upside down now, if you move page bottom towards Port A. Where. Over here, where condominium buildings.
Oh, yeah,
8 and
right.
9 were, yeah, so back here. We historically used to use that area as a maintenance yard operation. So we had a big, like 8-foot green construction fence around the perimeter, some gates in it. We had connexes sitting over there. We stored a tractor back there, some like golf carts and things like that. We had tools and other supplies
Just the
back
two that
there
are different.
for our operations. And that was eventually gonna become those Fountain Plaza cottages and a couple of single family homes. But at the time when we were developing, that was the boonies. It was like the middle of nowhere. No one even contemplated getting there for a number of years. So it felt like an appropriate place to place that operation, even though eventually it was gonna be single family type of uses. So we're proposing to be able to use really any type of transect for these temporary
David.
uses if it supports the operation of the development and seems like a appropriate type of use. We get pushback within our own community from our sales team all the time. If they're trying to sell something and that's in the backyard,
Mhm.
they're asking us, begging us right now to move those temporary trailers from the entrance of Cinnamon Shore South.
Right,
So we constantly have pressure to get these things as far away from folks as possible.
and my guess is you would get pressure from property owners if you wanted to use, say, an infill lot like this
Right.
for golf cart storage. This PUD would allow it. I mean, this, as written in here, would allow them to use that infill lot to store supplies, to
Right.
park golf carts. I just wanted to point that out. I don't know that necessarily, I mean, I think that their property owners would probably police them pretty heavily on
Yeah.
use, but I want to make sure that that's mentioned to protect those property owners as well.
Well, and they've got to have some place to store.
Okay, the or if the neighboring owner grants permission that the transitional setback is not required. I do need to get further clarification from city attorney because it's written into the ordinance specifically. So I think any deviation from that would require a variance, or I just want to get a better answer for him.
Okay.
Don't need to change anything right now. Just want to make you guys aware that that's something that might change at one of those readings in the future with council.
And that's
Okay.
really just there. We'd like to be able to remove it if
Sure.
we go annex new property in. So that we don't have to come back to remove a boundary that was set because it was on a boundary. And then we brought the neighboring property in. I don't want there to be like an artificial height limit. To that
Mhm.
little corridor just because it used to be on the edge. of the property.
Sure, and I think maybe we flesh out those situations where it absolutely would be allowed. I don't know that El Cortez can just give you written permission to not adhere to that setback boundary and that still kind of be okay with the city.
Okay,
So other
and I'm not
PUD,
even thinking about it in that
Right,
direction.
I
I'm
know.
thinking as we move south.
but I have to
Yeah.
think about it from all
Right.
property owners. Okay. That might be the last of mine.
Yeah, last thing they want is all the maintenance stuff with the rifle.
Okay, I think that was everything that I had. So as far as the notes that I've got, the changes that you guys wanted to make, I've got the 10% golf cart, I mean, that 20% golf cart reduced down to 10%, the 40 reduced down to 10% also.
Above 20%.
Going up to 20% with staff approval and going higher than that with a regular alternative parking plan. Planning and zoning city council approval. And then I've got the changes to the signs that we made. And the initial restriction of 60 foot for that T6 lot.
Correct.
Okay.
60.
60.
They said 60.
60.
Sorry, I heard 50.
Nope, I said 60.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And with respect to the motion on that, do you want the specifics of,
The sign.
you know, on the signs facing the PUD boundaries and the,
The
Say-
beach perimeter or the beach one.
Yeah, I would say let's put that into the motion. So how a zoning change, so technically this is a zoning change request. So how a zoning change request processes from you to city council is we'll put together a report from planning and zoning. So in the report, we'll discuss all of the different things. I'll put it together and send it out to you guys, kind of for tacit approval
Mhm.
prior to taking that to council. We'll ask our chairman, our acting chairman to sign that on behalf of city council. We'll ask that some of you, be in attendance at the city council meetings
Sure.
to kind of answer any questions that they might have of you about any of the discussion that we've had. So we present a report and recommendation to city council, and then the next agenda item, they would take up the thing.
okay,
So that all of this will be very clearly written in the report.
okay.
Yeah.
With that, do we have any more questions and can I invite a motion?
I make a motion to approve Plan 2514 major amendment for Cinnamon Shore PUD with the following changes, stipulations for golf cart parking, 10% max golf cart parking for all transects excluding residential, and 10% for all on-street parking. City staff will have the ability to up that to 20% at their discretion. Anything above 20% will need an alternative parking plan. 60-foot maximum roof height on T6 land, and signs following the city sign ordinance on non-PUD facing boundaries, as well as a nondescript property boundary sign or marker at the beach property line. Are we okay with that? Okay. Do a second.
We have a motion?
Another question before we do the second. Do we care that he just said T6? That
Yeah.
was more general.
Clarify that.
Okay.
would be
That
the,
need to be clarified that it.
yeah, the
this-
lot indicated.
At
as
the-
T6 On.
Yeah, we can put that. The lot indicated as T6 on, was it
Each
C
access road.
D1? Okay,
D.
yeah,
D1.
D1.
And I'd just like to add that certain things be deleted or modified in there to reflect building code.
And I'll definitely put that in.
Okay.
Everybody's
Yeah.
kind of strong
That in the
opinions,
motion.
Yeah.
as part of that report.
Yeah, so as well as update the PUD document with the changes discussed, the omissions, the changes in wording as discussed and agreed by y'all. Okay, you good with that? Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Brenda Owens,
Yes.
Richard Kate,
Yes.
Felicia Foster,
Yes.
Stephen Wilson,
Yes.
Bill Straber,
Yes.
Mike Bailey.
Yes. Okay. Item 5, Planning and Zoning Commission comments and items for future consideration. Nothing now.
Yes, we need to get back on our sign ordinance
I guess,
because we need to get that rolling so we can start working on the parking.
that's right.
So my intention is to convene that group back together to review some things that I've written about mid-June. To
Okay.
look over those. Hopefully it could come back to P and Z in June. So that we're not too far off of that schedule that we originally had
Right.
talked about. And that we could still shoot for kind of a January 1, 2026 implementation date.
Yeah, I'd like to get that behind us, so for the end of the year, we can start on the parking.
I need you to tell everybody to just stop calling me.
Uh,
In my office and write an ordinance.
Well, you know, summer's here, so just lock the door, shut the
Right.
blinds.
There's a lot going on right now.
There is a lot going on.
That's it.
Yes.
All right. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 5:15.
Too bad.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Thank y'all. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for explaining everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you, Dan.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate that.
David.
All right. I'm hungry.
Me too.
Oh, you're cooking?
Not tonight.
I didn't say buying, I said cooking.
They might have some leftovers.